If you've ever felt like your body is working against you, exhausted in a way sleep doesn't fix, anxious in situations that shouldn't feel threatening, stuck in patterns you've tried to break 100 times, there's a reason for that. A specific, measurable, research-backed reason. There's a 10-question checklist developed by the CDC. A simple list of things that may have happened to you before you turned 18. And it can predict your risk of heart disease, cancer, depression, addiction, and how long you'll live. It's called the ACE score. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what it measures, what the science says it's doing to your brain and body right now, and what you can actually do about it. This is Childhood Decoded, where we take peer-reviewed research in developmental psychology, neuroscience, and trauma science, and translate it into something you can actually use. Whether you're raising kids today or trying to understand yourself better, this one matters. Let's get into it. You've probably heard the word trauma thrown around a lot lately. But most of us don't think of our childhoods as traumatic, especially if nothing dramatic happened to mark it. Just a lot of smaller things. A parent who drank too much. A household that never felt quite safe. Emotional absence where there should have been warmth. That's exactly what the ACE study was designed to capture. In the early 1990s, an epidemiologist at the CDC named Dr. Robert Anda partnered with Dr. Vincent Felitti at Kaiser Permanente in Southern California. They wanted to know whether childhood experiences were an underlying cause of adult health problems. They surveyed more than 17,000 adults, most of them white, middle class, college educated. People we don't typically think of as traumatized. The findings were staggering. The study was published in 1998 in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine and became one of the most cited papers in public health history. The ACE questionnaire asks 10 yes or no questions about your life before age 18. 1 point for each yes. Here are the categories: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, witnessing domestic violence, a household member with a substance use problem, a household member with mental illness or who attempted suicide, a household member who went to prison, emotional neglect, feeling unloved or unimportant, physical neglect, parents who separated or divorced. Your total is your ACE score, 0 to 10. You might be thinking, okay, but that can't be most people. According to CDC data tracking, over 144,000 adults across all 50 states, 63.9% of U.S. adults reported at least one ACE, and 17.3%, nearly 1 in 6, reported 4 or more. 2 out of every 3 people in a waiting room, a workplace, a classroom have experienced at least one of these things. This is not rare. This is the majority, and the burden isn't distributed evenly. Research consistently shows that Native American and Alaska Native adults, multiracial adults, women, and people from lower income backgrounds report significantly higher rates of 4 or more ACEs. So we know it's common. Here's the part the original researchers called their most important finding. What you're about to see is why the numbers matter as much as they do. It's called a dose-response relationship. The more ACEs you have, the higher your risk for virtually every major adult health problem. Not a little higher, dramatically higher. Compared to someone with an AC score of 0, a person with 4 or more ACs faces 4 to 12 times higher risk for alcoholism, drug abuse, depression, and suicide attempts. 2 to 4 times higher risk for smoking and poor self-rated health. An elevated risk for heart disease, cancer, and chronic lung disease. At a score of 6 or higher, research published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine found those participants were 54% more likely to die during a 10-year study period. Their average lifespan was shortened by nearly 20 years compared to those with no ACEs. 20 years. Not because of genetics, not because of bad choices, because of what happened in childhood. So how does a hard childhood become heart disease or addiction decades later? That's the question that makes this research so important and so actionable. The bridge is something researchers call toxic stress. Dr. Jack Shonkoff and colleagues at Harvard defined it as the prolonged activation of a child's stress physiology in the absence of a safe, buffering relationship. Normal stress passes. Toxic stress keeps the alarm running for months, sometimes years. The key system involved is the HPA axis, your body's master stress response system, which releases cortisol and adrenaline when you're threatened. In short bursts, that's healthy. But when a child lives in an environment of chronic threat, abuse, neglect, witnessing violence, addiction in the home, that system stays activated. Cortisol floods the body day after day. Here's what that does to the developing brain. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, becomes hypersensitive. Hair trigger reactive. It starts scanning constantly for danger, even when there isn't any. That's why adults with high ACE scores often feel chronically anxious, easily startled, or on edge in situations that are actually safe. The alarm is stuck on. Your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation, becomes underdeveloped. Many trauma survivors struggle to regulate emotions under stress or find it hard to think long-term when they're activated. This is a structural consequence of what the brain experienced early on. And your hippocampus, your memory center, can lose neurons and connectivity under chronic cortisol exposure, leading to memory difficulties, a fragmented sense of time, and a self-concept that feels unstable. None of this is weakness, it's neurology. The research goes further than brain structure. ACEs don't just change how your brain functions, they can change how your genes behave. This is the field of epigenetics, the study of how environmental experiences can turn genes on or off without changing the underlying DNA itself. A 2023 study published in JAMA Network Open found that adults with 4 or more ACEs showed accelerated epigenetic aging. Their cells were biologically older than their chronological age. A separate systematic review found that early adversity is associated with shorter telomere length, the protective caps on your chromosomes. Shorter telomeres mean faster cellular aging and higher risk for cancer, cardiovascular disease, and early death. Your body keeps score right down to the chromosomal level. Now let's talk about the part that often feels most personal, the behaviors and patterns that show up in adult life. Because when we understand why we do what we do, we stop calling ourselves broken. We start understanding ourselves as adaptive. Research from Dubé, Felitti, and colleagues published in 2003 found that ACEs account for 65% of the population attributable risk for alcoholism, 50% for illicit drug use, and 78% for intravenous drug use. A 2024 study in Nature Human Behavior confirmed the most common pathway is self-medication, using substances to quiet a nervous system that never learned how to feel safe. The brain that grew up in chaos learned that external substances could calm the HPA axis, a coping system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Substance use in this context is a nervous system trying to survive. Then there are relationship patterns. High ACE scores are associated with insecure attachment, meaning anxious, avoidant, or disorganized ways of relating to others. Adults who grew up in unpredictable or dangerous environments often develop one of 4 survival responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, anger, avoidance, shutdown, people-pleasing. These were adaptations, brilliant ones once. The nervous system learned, this is how I survive. In adulthood, those same patterns can damage relationships, careers, and health. Something isn't wrong with you. Your system is still running old code. And then there's chronic illness. ACEs activate the immune system, triggering low-grade chronic inflammation. Research published in Brain Behavior and Immunity Health found that ACEs are associated with elevated inflammatory biomarkers and cortisol dysregulation in young adults. Chronic inflammation is now a recognized driver of heart disease, autoimmune conditions, diabetes, and certain cancers. Your immune system, like your nervous system, was shaped by what happened early. This is the part I need you to actually hear. A high ACE score is not a life sentence. The same neuroplasticity that made the developing brain vulnerable to trauma is also what makes healing possible. The brain can change at any age with the right inputs. Research on post-traumatic growth shows that people who develop emotional resilience and meaning-making capacities after ACEs don't just recover. They experience genuine transformation, deeper relationships, expanded sense of purpose, new perspectives on what they've survived. Here's what the science actually supports. 1. Trauma-focused therapy. Multiple randomized controlled trials support EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, as an effective treatment for trauma-related disorders. It works by reprocessing traumatic memories, weakening the amygdala's hyperactivated fear responses, and letting the prefrontal cortex come back online. Somatic therapies, approaches that work with the body, not just the mind, address what cognitive work often misses: trauma stored in physical tension, nervous system patterns, and bodily memory. 2. Safe, stable relationships. Research consistently identifies social support as one of the strongest protective factors against ACE-related health outcomes. A safe, attuned relationship with a therapist, a mentor, a partner, a community literally co-regulates your nervous system over time. What was dysregulated in relationship can be healed in relationship. 3. Nervous system regulation. Evidence supports mindfulness meditation, breathwork, and yoga as practices that strengthen the prefrontal cortex, reduce amygdala reactivity, and lower inflammatory markers. They don't erase the past, but they change your body's relationship with it. 4. Understanding your own story. One of the most healing things you can do is exactly what you're doing right now. When you understand why your nervous system does what it does, you stop fighting yourself. You build the capacity to respond instead of react. That's where freedom begins. We covered a lot today. The 10 categories of adverse childhood experiences, the dose-response relationship between ACE scores and adult health, the neuroscience of toxic stress, the epigenetic impact, and 4 evidence-based pathways toward healing. If your score is high, I want you to sit with this. You are not broken. Your brain and body adapted to survive an environment you didn't choose and couldn't control. Healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about building a present that's safe enough for your nervous system to finally begin to rest. And that is possible. Drop a comment below. What number surprised you most in this video? The prevalence stats, the lifespan data, the epigenetics? Tell me. If this kind of research-based content helps you, subscribe to Childhood Decoded. Everything I share here is for educational purposes. It's not a substitute for working with a therapist or mental health professional. This is Childhood Decoded. I'll see you in the next one.